Intelligence failures. Strategic miscalculations by both India and Pakistan ensured that the war ended in a stalemate. Indian miscalculations. Indian military intelligence gave no warning of the impending Pakistan invasion. The Indian Army failed to recognize the presence of heavy Pakistani artillery and armaments in Chum and suffered significant losses as a result. The official war history 1965, drafted by the Ministry of Defense of India in 1992, was a long-suppressed document that revealed other miscalculations. According to the document, on 20 September, when the Security Council was pressing for a ceasefire, the Indian Prime Minister asked Commanding General Chowdhury if India could possibly win the war were he to delay accepting the ceasefire. The general replied that most of India's frontline ammunition had been used up, and the Indian Army had suffered considerable tank losses. It was determined later that only 14% of India's frontline ammunition had been fired, and India held twice the number of tanks as Pakistan. By this time, the Pakistani Army had used close to 80% of its ammunition. Air Chief Marshal Reddit P.C. Lal, who was the Vice Chief of Air Staff during the conflict, points to the lack of coordination between the IAF and the Indian Army. Neither side revealed its battle plans to the other. The battle plans, drafted by the Ministry of Defense and General Chowdhury, did not specify a role for the Indian Air Force in the order of battle. This attitude of General Chowdhury was referred to by ACM Lal as the Supremo Syndrome, a patronizing attitude sometimes held by the Indian Army towards the other branches of the Indian military. Pakistani miscalculations. The Pakistani Army's failures began with the supposition that a generally discontented Kashmiri people would revolt against their Indian rulers, bringing about a swift and decisive victory. The Kashmiri people, on the other hand, remained calm and collected. The Indian Army was given enough information to understand Operation Gibraltar and that they were battling not insurgents, as they had initially thought, but Pakistani Army regulars. The Pakistani Army didn't know that Indian leaders wanted to attack the southern part of the country to start a new war. Pakistan had to send troops to the southern part of the country to protect Sialkot and Lahore instead of using them to help get to Kashmir. Pakistan's attempt to capture Aknur town northeast of Jammu, and a key region for communications between Kashmir and the rest of India, was a failure. Many Pakistani commentators said that the Ayub Khan administration was indecisive during Operation Grand Slam. The critics contend that the mission was unsuccessful due to Ayub Khan's awareness of the significance of Aknur to India, referring to it as India's jugular vein, and his reluctance to invade it and initiate a conflict. Although progress was made in Aknur, General Ayub Khan relieved the commanding officer, Major General Akhtar Hussain Malik, and replaced him with General Yahya Khan. During the replacement, a 24-hour pause was observed, enabling the Indian Army to regroup in Aknur and successfully repel a sluggish assault led by General Yahya Khan. The Indian Chief of Staff of the Western Command said, "The enemy came to our rescue." Then, Akhtar Hussain Malik criticized Ayub Khan for inventing Operation Gibraltar, which ultimately failed, and for denying him command at a crucial point in the conflict. Malik said he would tell the truth about the war and how the army failed, but later decided not to because he was afraid of being banned. Some authors have said that a war game that was held in March 1965 at the Institute for Defense Analyses in the United States might have encouraged Pakistan. The exercise concluded that Pakistan would prevail in the event of a conflict with India. Other authors like Stephen P. Cohen have consistently commented that the Pakistan Army had acquired an exaggerated view of the weakness of both India and the Indian military. The 1965 war was a shock. During the war, the Pakistani Air Marshal and Commander-in-Chief of PAF, Nur Khan, later stated that it is the Pakistan Army that should be held accountable for initiating the conflict, rather than India. However, propaganda about the war continued in Pakistan, with most of the blame being placed on the leadership and little importance given to intelligence failures. This pattern persisted until the disastrous outcome of the Indo-Pakistani War in 1971. Involvement of other nations. The United States and the United Kingdom have been the principal suppliers of military materiel to India and Pakistan since 1947. Both India and Pakistan were Commonwealth republics. While India had pursued a policy of nominal non-alignment, Pakistan was a member of both CENTO and CETO, and an ally of the West in its struggle against communism. Well before the conflict began, however, Britain and the United States had suspected Pakistan of joining both alliances out of opportunism to acquire advanced weapons for a war against India. They had therefore limited their military aid to Pakistan to maintain the existing balance of power in the subcontinent. In 1959, however, Pakistan and the United States had signed an agreement of cooperation under which the United States agreed to take appropriate action, including the use of armed forces to assist the government of Pakistan at its request. By 1965, American and British analysts had recognized the two international groupings, CENTO and CETO, and Pakistan's continued alliance with the West as being largely meaningless. Following the start of the 1965 war, both the United States and Britain took the view that the conflict was largely Pakistan's fault, and suspended all arms shipments to both India and Pakistan. While the United States maintained a neutral stance, the British Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, condemned India for aggression after its army advanced towards Lahore. His statement was met with a furious rebuttal from India. Internationally, the level of support which Pakistan received was limited at best. Iran and Turkey issued a joint communiqué on 10 September which placed the blame on India, backed the United Nations appeal for a ceasefire, and offered to deploy troops for an peacekeeping mission in Kashmir. Pakistan received support from Indonesia, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia in the form of 6 naval vessels, jet fuel, guns, and ammunition, and financial support, respectively. Pakistan didn't gain meaningful support at an international level. Since before the war, the People's Republic of China had been a major military associate of Pakistan, and a military opponent of India, with whom it had fought a brief war in 1962. China had also become a foreign patron for Pakistan and had given Pakistan $60 million in development assistance in 1965. During the war, China openly supported the Pakistani position. It took advantage of the conflict to issue a strongly worded ultimatum to India condemning its aggression in Tibet and hinting at nuclear retaliation by China. China had exploded its first nuclear device the previous year. Despite strong fears of Chinese intervention on the side of Pakistan, the Chinese government ultimately exercised restraint. This was partly due to the logistical difficulties of a direct Chinese military intervention against India and India's improved military strength after its defeat by China in 1962. China had also received strong warnings by the American and Soviet governments against expanding the scope of the conflict by intervening. In the face of this pressure, China backed down, extending the deadline for India to respond to its ultimatum and warning India against attacking East Pakistan. Ultimately, Pakistan rejected Chinese offers of military aid, recognizing that accepting it would only result in further alienating Pakistan internationally. International opinion considered China's actions to be dangerously reckless and aggressive, and it was soundly rebuked in the world press for its unnecessarily provocative stance during the conflict. India's participation in the non-aligned movement yielded little support from its members. Support given by Indonesia to Pakistan was seen as a major Indian diplomatic failure, as Indonesia had been among the founding members of the non-aligned movement along with India. Despite its close relations with India, The Soviet Union was more neutral than other nations during the war, inviting both nations to peace talks under its aegis in Tashkent.